I've had a lot of experience freelancing, consulting, and doing production work for various companies, in addition to a long stint at Game House as art lead and production artist. I've done a lot of different creative gigs, so mostly for games, and I've been around a while. I've worked download executable, I've worked in Flash, I've worked in old mobile, I've worked in smart mobile, I've worked in Unity, and now for the last 2 years I've been working in HTML5. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. Something I've always loved is the challenge of new tools and new technologies. So 2 years ago, when my partner Craig, who's back here, thanks for showing up, Craig, asked me if I was interested in starting an HTML5 studio. I think I thought about it for 10 minutes or so and said, yeah. It sounded really challenging and sounded like a great challenge and something I'd enjoy very much. So in the beginning, in 2012, when we looked around to see what was out there in terms of HTML5 games, it was a really mixed bag. There were a lot of games out there. There were a lot of really bad games doing nothing right, and a handful of really bad games doing one thing right. And we kind of took a good look around and noticed that, you know, this one thing right that all these bad games were doing, it was a different thing, right? So one would be really well designed, but everything else would be wrong. Or maybe something had some good art and worked well, but everything else was kind of a flop. So we really had a hunch that we could kind of work our way into the space and make beautiful games that are a full package of everything working right. So the first game we made was called Bubble Hit. And here's an example. This was their web game, but it looks very much like the HTML5 game they put before us. It didn't work too well, and what they wanted was a bubble shooter that you know, looked very much like a contemporary casual game like you might see native. So we set about doing that. On the right, you see you know, what we came up with. We built a game that ran on all devices pretty well. Of course, it was still kind of early. We had to rely a lot on sprite animations, which isn't necessarily ideal for the mobile web. You know, it tends to have a pretty big art budget and lend to big loading times. Even though the performance is okay, it's just not necessarily ideal for a lot of complicated animations. So, you know, over the years, it seems to be changing. We've been seeing a lot of games come out lately, and a lot of you know, a lot of different games are coming out with much better production quality. That being said, I'm not the biggest expert on the state of the industry, and that's not what this talk is about. So I'm going to shift now for the art track part of this. How many here work in the creative department, deal with creative software, and how many are on the business side of things? So, good.
On both.
Okay, great. So we've got a lot of artists in the room, and that's good, or at least creatives who can kind of wrap their head around the software. So, you know, the good news with any new technology or platform is that, you know, most of our tools don't change. We get kind of a free pass being artists. You know, we're working in Photoshop, we're working in Illustrator, you know, we're doing our 2D and 3D things. You know, most of the beautiful artwork is created in these tools that we've used for years and years, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But one of the first big problems with HTML5 when we started a couple years ago was that there were no tools to bring good quality animation that was very well suited for mobile web. So, like I said before, you know, we relied a lot on, you know, sprite image sequences and stuff like that, but you know, it only works in the context of a really simple game because you don't have as much artwork going into it. You can rely on small movements, small explosions, and kind of small effects to do most of the heavy lifting. So, you know, most of the animation tools for HTML5, both then and now, were primarily designed around like web page design and stuff like that. They did really simple things to kind of, you know, sparkle up a web page, but they really didn't have a lot of, you know, relevance to kind of the needs of game design and game designers and character animation and stuff like that. I did a lot of experimenting with them, you know, making small movements, small explosions, and, you know, loading bars and just really simple things that they were, you know, designed maybe to handle, but then, you know, I'd hand the code over to the dev and it would just be kind of a train wreck from there. They'd wind up writing it themselves, and so that was just kind of a wash. We messed a little bit with some, you know, Flash exporters that were out there at the time, but they were also too limiting. It's kind of like if you want to give an artist a tool, you don't want to hand them something that says, okay, here's Flash. You've worked in Flash for years. You can only use 2 or 3 features, and that's the only thing that's going to work for what we do. So forget everything you know, and you know, only use 1% of the software. So in addition to that, a lot of them were built for specific engines. Our game engine is based on Pixie. We built it most ourselves on the Pixie canvas rendering. So they didn't really have a lot of appeal to us, some of the smaller exporters. Along the way, we found TweenJS, which was kind of a nice halfway tool in that it was simple. It worked with our engine. You know, and it was kind of an easy menu of tweens that an artist could look at. So for things like windows moving in, buttons popping up, and even game pieces with, you know, kind of simple motions, it was kind of nice to have TweenJS. You know, the artists didn't get to do it or put their finesse in it, but the developers really didn't have to either. You could just go to their website and look at these tweens, and if you've ever, you know, seen an animation tween, or for some of the music folks we have, it works a lot like a volume tween, right? You can just say, okay, use that one. Let's take a look at it. No, let's go with the slower one over here. And you know, we still use it to this day for some of those simple things that, you know, we don't necessarily need to get too surgical about. So, you know, like I said before, in our earlier games, we relied on you know, simple sprite strips with tweens and stuff like that. It was kind of reminiscent of the old executable download games where, you know, you'd have to download this bundled software, which could only be like 1 megabyte, and that's kind of like, you know, some of the challenges you have with the open mobile web is that you still have load times, and you don't really want your player to have to waste a bunch of time looking at a loading sequence, waiting for these weighty art assets to come through. I mean, it better be, you know, one heck of a great experience if you want people to stick around for it. So, you know, complex animations and intricate riggings built from scratch, they're not really an option for a small studio like us. Our devs don't have time to put that kind of stuff together. The artists don't have time to learn dev and do it themselves. So, you know, we stuck mostly to simple games in the first year. And then about a year ago, Spill came to us and approached us to develop a series of pet training games, and you know, they really wanted us to kind of, you know, embrace the, you know, this pet franchise, right? So right away I identified I wanted it to be a side scroller because I'd seen some good side scrollers implemented in HTML5. I knew it could be done. We had already found the tools we needed to get that done. But I didn't really quite know how I was going to handle characters in the size and scope and the range of motion that we really wanted to pull off. So it was about that time that I discovered Spine. And I'll go ahead and throw out there, Spine, I don't know Spine, I don't know the guys over there, they haven't paid me to do this, but this is like a total sales pitch because I really love this tool and it's really saved us a lot of trouble and it's really brought a lot to our games that we would have never been able to do on our own. So, Spine was introduced to the public in January 2013. It's a skeletal 2D animation system. This is nothing new. A lot of people have been using you know, Unity and Maya to pull off you know, 2D looking animation with their 3D tools. It's you know, skeletal animation's been going on in 3D game development since the beginning of 3D game development. So it's not really a new concept, but it's kind of new in that this is one of the first tools I've seen for just 2D implementations. So they only offer X, Y, they don't offer Z, which is, you know, it's kind of neat. It keeps things simple for us. They started it as a proprietary tool for their own game development needs, but I think when they got done, they realized it was well suited for a public commercial product. Since they released, they've had 2 major Kickstarters where they put up a lot of features as stretch goals, and they crushed it both times. So there's a lot of people using it. People who use it really love it, and there's a big community building using this. So in the context of the open web and HTML5 development, skeletal 2D animation is a really great solution for a lot of reasons. So just kind of a breakdown on what skeletal animation is. For 2D skeletal animation, say you've got a character that's a human figure. You basically have art assets that are nothing but the hand, the arm, the upper arm, the shoulder, the body, all the body parts. And these are all you need, and these never change, and that's the only artwork you need to ship through. And basically, you rig them together in a series of bones and joints, much like you would assemble a skeleton out of bones. And the only information that changes is the animation data. So all the locations, all of the angles, everything like that is what gets processed, and you never have more than just these very small sources of artwork. It uses interpolation for rendering at runtime, so if you're on a device with a slow frame rate, the animation isn't going to chug it down further. It's just going to, on the fly figure out where it needs to be for that particular frame rate. You can skin multiple characters, so if you've got a lot of animations going for a particular type of character and you want different characters to recycle that, you can just swap the skins and use all those animations, maybe even tweak them a bit. There's animation mixing, and this is something that's not possible really to do with sprite rendering. And that's where if player input, say you've got a puppy running, it jumps midair and the player decides to do something like roll in the middle of it, they'll render a tween between the 2 animation sequences you need, and it looks seamless, unlike image sequences where you're either going to have to speed it way up and it's going to look funny, or you're going to have to pop from one to the next and it's going to look funny. So there's a lot of procedural animation benefits. You can have a character, point and use the same animation, but based on character input, it can be in different locations without needing its own specific art assets to do that. There's 2 editors in Spine, so the workflow breaks down into 2 processes. Starting in setup, basically you go through and you set up your skeleton. I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the next slide. So right here, as I was talking about, this is a unicorn. You can see all the bones, the way it's been set up into the skeleton, and you can see all the different parts that go into this unicorn, right? So that's the only artwork we need. And in this game, we had, I believe, 10 separate animation sequences that ranged from 15 frames to like 45 frames. We had them broken up into pieces so that it could interpolate on the fly when you're when the player's making decisions about different movements. But in essence, this is the only artwork. That's the only PNG data you need, are just those handful of pieces, and you can have just an infinite amount of animations because it's only the movement data that gets recorded. And there's our unicorn. Seems to be a little lag, but thank you. So once you've set up your skeleton, it's kind of ironclad there. All of the attributes you put in the skeleton, they stay there. You go into the animation editor, which is basically just a kind of a toggle switch up in the corner. Animation is pretty intuitive. It's a keyframe editor. Anybody who's animated before, you can sit this in front of any artist with an animation background, and they're going to know what to do as far as getting things to move around. There's a lot of features that I won't get into today, but it offers tweening, it offers ghosting, so you can have reference across many frames. You've got offset, so you can loop certain motions really easily. It's got a really nice, rich set of really well-functioning features. that any animator will appreciate having access to. This is what it looks like. So you've got your skeleton tree down on the right-hand side. You've got your animation dope sheet down on the bottom, and this is the entire system. So one thing I like about it is the simplicity, because with 2D animation, you don't really need all the, all sorts of crazy bells and whistles. You don't need all the barnacles you deal with in something like Flash or Maya. So it's really nice system to work in. You've got multiple exporting formats. It'll export the animation data in JSON or binary. You can also, if you choose to go the route of PNG sequences, it'll render those out for you too, straight out of Spine. And you can even do AVI or QuickTime movies. They have a built-in, full-featured, really robust texture packer, so you don't have to have an external texture packer to bundle up all your art assets. It puts them in a single image for you and spits out a JSON map for the developer to plug right in. We haven't had any problems with that. And this is what the texture map might look like for the Raccoon character. So this was a raccoon that we developed for a game called S'more Words for iWin, and it's a word game in the style of Text Twist. And this was the animation I set up, so whenever you scramble your words to get your letters mixed up on the tray, he would jumble up his s'more like that. So, as I said before, the learning curve is real easy. We haven't had any problems with our artists being handed this tool, especially the ones who've animated before. They kind of jump right in, they love it right away. The development cycle at Spine has been really great. They have a good community backbone. Their second Kickstarter was almost stretch goaled out entirely on community feedback, and they got them all done. I'm looking forward to their next one. Hopefully it'll be by the end of the year, but we'll see. They have a Trello board so the community can kind of provide feedback to the company itself on what features are important. You can vote for features, so if they've got something slated way down the line, but the community responds and says, hey, no, we want this right away, they will actually move it up to the front. I've seen it happen just in the year that I've been working with Spine. People vote for things and they put it at the front of the list. The licensing is affordable for any studio, no matter what's your size. It starts out little and ends big, depending on the budget and scope of your studio. So that's Spine in a nutshell. It's a pretty indispensable tool in our studio, and I kind of wanted to share it with everybody here because we hope more people will use it, and we think it's really good for HTML5 development, especially in dealing with complex characters, machinery, and things with moving parts. So here's my contact information. Stop by the Absolute Hero table at Yosemite 621, and we'll show you some great game demos with all of these awesome characters that we've been building over the last year, running on all devices through the browser, HTML5. Good stuff. Do we have time for any questions?
Yeah. If anybody has some questions.
Do you know if, now I'm making you a Spine representative here, but do you know, are they looking into 3D? Are they looking into getting a Z-axis in there?
I really don't know. I don't think there's a need for that niche. I wouldn't expect it to happen because they really wanted a 2D tool, as I believe. I've never talked to them about it, right? But 3D software is 3D software, and I think they wanted a solution for game engines, particularly smaller ones for mobile, that didn't require 3D artists to have to learn their way around a 3D editing environment, which they're very, very complicated compared to something like this or even Flash. So I wouldn't expect them to do that unless maybe they get acquired and by somebody with a 3D engine or a 3D software system.
Do you have issues with swapping out assets like T-shirts or hats or things like that?
For skinning to a character?
Yeah, say you want a character and you want to sell funny hats,
No,
you have a hat there and then programmatically controlled.
I think it would probably be I don't think that would be really that difficult to do. I mean, I'm not on the development end so much, but we've had characters. So in this pet training game, right, we have the characters. They look all clean and happy, but if you don't take care of them, they start looking dirty and sad and everything like that.
And is that like swapping out a full?
It's just swapping out a full art asset set, right? But we have situations, right? So maybe you just clean them, but they're still hungry, so they look sad. So we're just switching out the mouth. Yeah. You could do that with a number of hats, and you could probably store those hats externally and call them up as need be. I think it would be a snap, right? So if you had a changing array of things, I don't think it would be that difficult at all. No, we haven't tried it, but
I'll have to take a look at it.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So
that's the kind of tool. This is the kind of tool we've been looking at for a while, and there's like Dragon Bones and some other stuff that they were doing at Adobe, or I guess they bought Dragon Bones.
Oh, okay,
did they? It was a little bit weird. And it's similar to this, the kind of like using Flash tools and then export.
Yeah.
I felt like I had a lot of problems with, controlling that kind of thing.
It's kind of like I said before. You don't want to put somebody in Flash who loves Flash and knows Flash and have them in a situation where they're constantly running into things that they love to do but can't do anymore. Yeah. And that was, that was kind of a situation we had when we first put Spine in front of one of our Flash developers. Mm-hmm. They kept trying to grab keyframes in a certain way and not getting the results they wanted. And I wish they could, but it took a couple days to just jump out of that mindset and realize, okay, but everything here is everything we need is here, and even more. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that we haven't messed with. We haven't messed with a lot of IK. We haven't messed with a lot of the things that are in there. They have free-form deformation that so far no one's plugged into Pixie, so we haven't been able to use it. And that's taking a bitmap and moving it around, squeezing it and morphing it and doing all kinds of cool stuff. So if it works in the engine, and that's another thing too. This isn't just for JavaScript output. They have lots of the list of runtimes is a mile long. Unity and C++, and you could probably port the output to any, just about any type of engine.
And then one more question was, how do you feel like on mobile, on say a lower Android device or something like that? Like how's the performance?
I'm supposed to stay over here where the camera is. Sorry. On Android or a lower end device,
so
it does all right. It's kind of on par with all the performance issues you might have with the other elements in the game. Okay. So if the frame rate, because of the side-scrolling aspect, might be dragging down, Spine uses interpolation. So if that's playing well, it will actually compensate for that reduced frame rate and keep things on track, which is really nice. So if the device itself is slow, it doesn't seem to be pulling performance down even more. And it's identifying that and kind of interpolating frame by frame where the animation needs to be, rather than forcing each frame to slow down and catch up.
Okay.
So. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.